What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You guys already know what it is. It's draft season all year long, and today we are going to be doing a full mock draft just about a week after free agency started. It actually might be exactly a week after free agency started, but now the Carolina Panthers are drafting number one overall. There have been rumors that they're looking at trading back because they're happy with more than one of the quarterbacks in this year's draft, but I see it highly unlikely considering how much they gave up to move up, that they would move back down again. And so we're going to stick and pick here. Now, I have been posting my top fives on my TikTok and Instagram. So if you guys want to go check that out, I guess I'll leave it in the description. But I saw a lot of you guys really call for CJ Stroud as a number one quarterback in this year's overall class. So we're going to go ahead and take him there just because of the popularity that's been in the comment section lately. I do read it. And, it's really not out of the realm of possibility that he does go number one. So I am totally fine with doing that here. Number two, this is going to be the no-brainer pick right here, Bryce Young. In my opinion, although you may think that Will Levis or Anthony Richardson might have more upside than either of these two guys, I think for both of these franchises, you need to make sure that you have a sure thing at quarterback. And CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, I think both have put on enough on tape and already possess a ton of talent where it's like you don't have to even worry about them just like absolutely being a bust. I mean, I think they'll be half decent enough where you'll feel fine and comfortable taking them there at number one and number two, respectively. Now, number three right here, we're going to go with the best overall defensive player in this year's draft. And I think it's more clear cut that it's going to be Will Anderson who goes here just because of what's going on with Jalen Carter's situation there off the field and also him putting on weight. So, those things can definitely concern teams. I don't know if it concerns Arizona or not at the moment, but I do know that Will Anderson is a really good football player, and he does have none of those issues. He actually has, really good character from what we've heard through the combine and even earlier on in the draft process. So I think this would be a good fit, would fill a need, and is also the best player available there for Arizona at number three. Now here, number four, I'm going to go ahead and take Will Levis here out of Kentucky for the Indianapolis Colts right here. Now, best case scenario for them, no one trades up with Arizona there at that number three spot to go and get a quarterback. And, even if they do, I mean, you're still going to have one of the quarterbacks on the board, whether it's Levis, Richardson, or maybe one of the others. So I don't think you're completely screwed, but they're going to go with Levis here, a guy with an absolute cannon of an arm, and you're really banking on his upside and his potential. Now, I'm not really high on Will Levis at all, but I do see him going somewhere here in the top five to one of these teams potentially. Now, number five here, I think Pete Carroll is really high on the character of his players. And, maybe it's not as much of an emphasis when you get into the later rounds, but I think these early rounds, I think it's like really huge. It's a big focal point for him. I'm not sure. I'm just, speculating. And so for that reason, we're going to go Tyree Wilson here. Like, it would make sense to bring in Jalen Carter when it just comes to football and just who's the best player and bring him in and how much can he be an impact on the team. But I think the interview process is huge for Pete Carroll, like with these early on picks. And so I just think that he's going to refrain from taking Jalen Carter this high in the draft, considering what's going on off the field. But it won't hurt Jalen Carter too much because we're going to take him here at the next pick. Now, here for Seattle, I think Tyree Wilson is going to be a good fit for this team. You're really banking on his upside as well and the physical traits that he possesses. I mean, he has extremely long arms, and so that's going to give him an advantage every single time on every single snap. Is also very versatile on the outside and on the inside, plays both at a very high level. And so although he's a really raw talent, he's already, has a decent amount of production from several different spots on the defensive line. So he could really be a big-time weapon if he does live up to that potential. But it's a really scary player when you look at his build. I mean, I think he's about 6'6" as well, so pretty big dude. And then for Jalen Carter, of course, I think he's going to fall slightly in the draft just because of the things that's happening off the field. His talent is certainly not an issue. But, it would hurt me if the Lions got him because we have to play him twice a year, and he's a damn good football player. But it is the right pick for the Lions to make here if he's sitting here at number six. Now, I might have to improvise a little bit on this mock draft because I had done this before I recorded, just to prepare. And I was waiting for it to download, and it didn't. So we might have to improvise a little bit here because I don't know if I remember all 31 picks in the trades that I made, but we're going to try and get through it. And, just like the real NFL draft, right? Going to have to improvise. So here for number 7, and I remember who I took here. It's Devin Witherspoon here. Now, we could certainly go tackle here. And some of you guys might be calling for it just because you feel like it's a more valuable position, and also considering how much depth there is at the cornerback position this year. But Devin Witherspoon is one of my favorite players in this year's draft, like not just in the cornerback class, but in the entire draft class as a whole. I think at this point, I would take him. We've seen guys like Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley, Denzel Ward, even some not so great ones like Jeff Okudah go this high in the draft. And I think Devin Witherspoon is definitely in that category where it's like in a different draft class where maybe there's not so many QB needy teams at the top of the board. He could certainly be a top 5 pick. So to have him here at number 7, he'd start immediately for the Las Vegas Raiders. I think he's going to be cornerback 1, and is just an extremely good talent. Again, there is a lot of depth on the board here for cornerback this year, but if you have the ability to get those top tier guys and they can play immediately, I'm going to go ahead and snag them every single time. And that's what we're going to do here with Devin Witherspoon with the Las Vegas Raiders. Here at number 8, I really thought hard about this one, but I really like Jackson Smith-Njigba here. I understand that the edge rusher position, and we're going to talk about this on the next team too with the Chicago Bears, both of these teams, where I understand that it's a huge emphasis right now to try and upgrade that position, but there are certain scenarios where you do not draft for need because of what the board looks like. And I'm looking at the board right now, and do I feel comfortable taking any of these guys that you see on the screen right now in the top 10? Absolutely not. And so you may be telling yourself, okay, this is certainly a position where maybe Atlanta could trade down. I don't see Chicago trading down again after they already traded down from the number 1 spot. So maybe Atlanta can trade back here, but I'm just looking at the teams here. I just am not really confident about who I would want to trade up. I don't want to make a trade just for the sake of making one. And I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is a top 10 player in this year's draft, would definitely fill a need. They did just sign Matt Collins a few hours ago from when I'm recording this. But you have Drake London, you have Matt Collins, and then Jackson Smith-Njigba could be the other guy in the slot. I know that Kyle Pitts will probably have a good handful of snaps in the slot as well, and also from his tight end position, and then Jonnu Smith as well. And so I think here you're really setting up Desmond Ridder for success right here. And just a guy who understands how to get open and catches the ball really well. I really like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I don't know. There was a little bit of hate on him from a small group of people here in the draft community, but I'm all in here at number 8. I just, again, don't feel comfortable taking any of these guys in the top 10. We do not want to reach because of what our team needs are. Sometimes it's just not worth it. Here at number 9, as I mentioned before, probably not going to trade down. And this is another spot where it's like you really, really want to go ahead and get that edge rusher. But as I just mentioned, there's no one on the board that I personally feel comfortable with taking here in the top 10. And so we're going to just try and take the best player available here, and that's Christian Gonzalez. Now, I do understand that it is still a relatively young cornerback room there with the Chicago Bears. Jalen Johnson, Kyle Vildor, I believe his name is, first name, and also Kyler Gordon, who you guys took in the second round last year. Now, Jalen Johnson is on a contract year, so it is possible that they could take a cornerback here, even though it's not one of the biggest needs. But I think that Ryan Poles did a great job of just, addressing all of the needs in free agency that this team had. And so they really have an opportunity here to go best player available, barring that one of the top edge rushers are not here at this point in time. And so Christian Gonzalez, I think, is regarded as a top 10 talent and does have a real chance of going this high in the draft. And I think that this would be another solid foundation piece for this young roster with the Chicago Bears to work with here with the number 9 overall pick. Now, number 10 here for the Philadelphia Eagles, we're going to go with Brian Branch. Now, they lost a lot of pieces on the defensive side and also added a couple. And I think safety is one of those spots that we can really look at. I know Reed Blankenship is probably going to take over one of the spots there, but I kind of wanted to address another spot in the secondary there. Very versatile player in Brian Branch, one of my favorite overall players. I don't know if he goes this high, just because I'm not sure if, like, it's going to sound weird saying this, but, like, his versatility might hurt him in a way because teams are not sure what kind of role that they want to put him in, and I'm sure a lot of teams already have plans and scenarios for if that happens. But Brian Branch is a true talent, and you can put him in so many places on the field, and he will excel in those spots. And really, this kind of speaks for the safety class as a whole. A lot of these guys are very instinctual, and although he might not be the most athletic safety in the class, his instincts, almost like Kyle Hamilton last year, is what helps him get from one point to the other really quickly on the field. They just can read things really well, process really quickly, and, that makes up for, I wouldn't say their lack of athleticism, but not top-tier athleticism. So I like him here for the Philadelphia Eagles. Here for the Tennessee Titans, go ahead and get the tackle of your choice. We're going to go with Peter Skoronski here. He's not my number one tackle in this year's draft, but I think he is a pretty sure thing. I mean, I know there's questions about his arm length, but it hasn't seemed to be a problem here at college football, and I know the NFL is a little different, but gave up one of the lowest pressure rates, and I don't believe gave up a sack in his final year there at Northwestern. So a really promising player that was on a struggling team overall in Northwestern. But the production says all you need to know. And, if the physical traits are not an issue, then he'll be just fine in the league. But that is a huge if. And so, but either way, Tennessee needs to go out there and get themselves a tackle to protect whoever it is at quarterback, most likely Ryan Tannehill. It just was not pretty along the offensive line last year. So this is a great foundation piece to start rebuilding that group right there. And Peter Skoronski is a pretty solid player, in my opinion. I have him as my number 3 and also as a first-round talent. Okay, this is, I believe, where we're going to have our first trade right here. And it's going to be with the Washington Commanders. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys can already infer what that's going to be. Now, we're going to do this right here, where we're going to trade the number 12 pick for number 16 and a third-round pick here. And we're going to go ahead and get the Washington Commanders' Anthony Richardson. Now, on this roster right now, you have Jacoby Brissett and Sam Howell. Now, Sam Howell could potentially be the future, but we've only seen him play in one game, and this is a guy that they've only invested a 5th-round pick into, and so you're not really tied to this guy if you don't want him to. And there's a possibility where, it might not be Anthony Richardson. It could be any of these quarterbacks, really, that could really fall after these top 4 picks. And so I think when it reaches a certain point, one of these teams is going to trade up, not because of the fear of a team also in this range of getting a quarterback, but I think it's the fear of another team jumping them and getting whoever it is. And in this case, it's Anthony Richardson right here. Washington just needs to go in and secure it. And look, the thing is, this is a great scenario because, maybe you can still find out what exactly you have in Sam Howell. But I do think that the ceiling is much, much higher with Anthony Richardson here. And, obviously, he's going in the 1st round compared to Sam Howell in the 5th. And you don't need to play him immediately if he's not ready. That's what you bring in Jacoby Brissett for as well, as a potential bridge quarterback for this team. He could be the starter week 1. And so I think that there's a lot of value to this pick here. And I really don't think that Washington would mind giving up a 3rd-round pick if it means that they could potentially get their franchise quarterback of the future right there. Now here at number 13, we're going to do a player trade. So we have the Green Bay Packers here. And, it's not official yet, but he's pretty much on the team. And it says that they're not interested, but, they're interested in real life. And so we're going to just trade a 1st-round pick straight up for Aaron Rodgers. I think this could be reasonable. I'm not sure if they're trying to get more, like maybe 2 first-round picks, but you typically see that for high-end younger players. This is a guy in Aaron Rodgers who still can play at an elite level, but is 40 years old. And so I do think they have the leverage in that sense where I think they could potentially get a 1st-round pick out of it. So that's exactly what we're going to go ahead and do here. And I think the Jets would be more than happy to do that because I think it would instantly make them competitors in the AFC. And, the AFC is already loaded as it is, so you really need a high-caliber quarterback to keep up with it. They already have the defense. So this would be a good trade for them. Good trade for both sides, I mean, it's not every day that you get a first-round pick for a 40-year-old player. So here for the first pick here for the Green Bay Packers, we're going to go ahead and take Lucas Van Ness here, the edge rusher out of Iowa. Now, I don't really want to consider him an edge just because he played so much on that interior, not in the super middle interior, but kind of like that 5-tech spot. So very versatile player. I mean, can play on the outside, but we saw a lot of his snaps in between the tackle and the guard as well. So it can be productive from both sides. He's a really physical football player. Wins using his strength and his bull rush. So I know some people are comparing him to J.J. Watt. I'm not that high on Lucas Van Ness as some others are. But I do think that the Packers are going to continue the trend of going on the defensive side of the ball. And I think this spot makes sense because you didn't sign back Dean Lowry. I know you have Devontae Wyatt and also Kenny Clark. And so maybe you could put him in that other spot where maybe Dean Lowry has kept vacant. I know there's another player on there. I just can't come up with his name. I know he's relatively solid. But then also Preston Smith is getting old. He's still a really productive player, but you can put him out there, pair him up with Rashawn Gary as well. So much potential and so much versatility with Lucas Van Ness here. I just think this pick makes too much sense. Here at number 14, I thought about trading down here with the New England Patriots, but again, I didn't want to force anything. And so they need a tackle. Trent Brown is still on the team. Isaiah Wynn is not. We're going to go ahead and take Broderick Jones, another tackle out of Georgia, ironically. But this is a team that loves to get their offensive linemen out in space. They love the athletic offensive linemen. And that's exactly what the profile is here of Broderick Jones. So he's going to be that Isaiah Wynn replacement right here at number 14 overall. And hopefully give Mac Jones more protection and also allow them to do all the things they want to do in the playbook with their highly athletic offensive linemen that they like to bring in. Now, here at number 15 for the Green Bay Packers, we're going to go ahead and actually take an offensive player, but it's not going to be a wide receiver because they don't like to touch that position for some reason. But they didn't bring back Robert Tonyan, and so I do think you need a tight end. We're going to bring in Michael Mayer right here, and I think for them, they're going to like to line up their tight end along the line of scrimmage. The reason why I didn't take Dalton Kincaid is because, he can do that, and he has done that. It's not like he's an untraditional tight end where he's more of like a wide receiver, but does have that skill set. Like Michael Mayer, I think, might be the better blocker out of the two, and it's really close. Like, I really like both of these tight ends a lot. It's really close. But I just think Michael Mayer fits more of what Green Bay wants to do with that tight end position. They've become a run-heavy team recently with Matt LaFleur, and so I think they're going to make an emphasis on keeping the tight end bunched up along the offensive line and really emphasize blocking. I like Michael Mayer here at number 15. Number 16 overall here with the Houston Texans. We're going to go Kalijah Kancey here. Now, I know that there is a real possibility that this team could go cornerback here at this spot. However, you have DeMeco Ryans there, and I think he's going to want to build that front seven before he starts building up that secondary because, there is importance to each and every one of those positions, but the strength of that defense there in San Francisco was built along the front seven, your defensive linemen and your linebackers here, and they just don't have much of a presence there. And I think looking at what is there on the board with the edge rushers, it's possible. Maybe someone like Nolan Smith, Myles Murphy might go at that spot. But Kalijah Kancey, this is a guy who can create pressure from the middle, be disruptive right in the face of the quarterback, and can also be very disruptive in the run game despite being what some would say slightly undersized. His athleticism makes up for a lot of that, and you can see that on tape when he's at Pittsburgh. And so I think that this would be a pick that DeMeco Ryans would be absolutely ecstatic about and would really be a great piece to start off this new regime here for the Houston Texans under DeMeco Ryans. Again, I'm going to emphasize this, I think they're going to address this front seven in this year's draft. So what a start that would be for them going the inside out. Here at number 17, now this would be so interesting because Joey Porter played for the Steelers. However, we talked about how the cornerback position has so much depth. And look, Real possibility that they do take him here. Wouldn't be shocked. Wouldn't complain about it either. I do think they're going to go tackle, though, because it is a little more thin at the position. Actually, it's not a little more thin. It's a lot more thin. Where, if these guys fly off the board, there aren't many other options that you feel comfortable with, even with them drafting number 32 overall, which is the first pick in the second round this year. So we're going to go ahead and take Paris Johnson here out of Ohio State. I mean, both of their tackles are just not good enough, and you don't want to see Kenny Pickett get hurt because his offensive line is not good enough to protect the young franchise quarterback, and so I think that's so important. I've been emphasizing it with this team for, as long as this draft process has been going on. I've been calling for them to get a tackle since last year's mock drafts, and it's no different now. So, you have a couple of tackles to choose from here, left or right, whoever you think is the best, but we're going to go with Paris Johnson there at number 17 now. I did have a trade here. I know that the Detroit Lions moved back, and I think I know who it is. So, right here, we are going to bring up. Oh no! Actually, no. We stick in pick here. Spoiler alert: there's gonna be a trade really soon. What are we gonna do here? Let me look at the options on the board, and I think I'll get a good general idea of what I wanted to do. Okay, I remember now. We're gonna go Nolan Smith here. Now, this is a case where, no, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of talent still left on the board, and I just completely brain farted. Again, guys, trying to improvise because we were having technical difficulties with the board that I tried to prepare before, but didn't really work out. So we're going to go with Nolan Smith here. This is a guy that I think could go higher had he not been hurt in a couple of his years at Georgia, which really hurt his production in some places. And understandably so. You play less games, you're going to be less productive. But Nolan Smith, I think is a true athletic talent. And you can see that, although he's 230 pounds, just plays with a lot of physicality. And that physicality and speed combination, could truly be something. And the reason why I don't have him going earlier is because of the injury history that he's had in the past. And I think it will concern some teams. But here for the Lions, they're also in a spot where they can just draft the best player available, and I think that this would be one of those players regarded as the best player available at this point in the draft. I don't know. Some of you guys might complain because like, oh yeah, well we have Aiden Hutchinson, we have James Houston. Look, having a good rotation of edge rushers is never an issue, and James Houston really excelled as a rotational piece, not as a full-time starter throughout the entire season. And so that might just be the role for him to play and just be at his best. And so I would not rule out the possibility of this. I would really like to see them take a linebacker. I just think it makes a lot of sense. But I've been told from very early on that they are not going to take a linebacker. And so, you Lions fans know better than me. I'm not even going to argue with it. It is what it is, and we move on here to get a good player. Two good players from Georgia. So, yeah, okay. Here at number 19 here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, we talked about cornerback early on, but they were able to bring back Carlton Davis, right? And that was the huge piece that we were talking about. But that did sacrifice some other players, so Donovan Smith had to go. So we're going to replace him here with Anton Harrison, who actually is my number one tackle in this year's draft. Really good job in pass protection, and he has had his hiccups throughout his time at Oklahoma, but I think that there's a lot of potential with him, and I think when it comes to building your guys in the trenches, right, like what is the build that you're looking for? You want the guys who are going to set the tone, be physical, be bullies in the trenches. I think that Anton Harrison has the potential to be the bully of this year's draft. And really, if he can put all of his talent together and all the pieces together, this could be the best tackle in the draft when it's all said and done. So I like this here. It's a potential pick. It's a good value pick, and it's a pick that also fills a need here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I would be pretty excited about this pick here at number 19. Here at number 20, we are going to have a trade. So we are going to have the New York Giants trade up here with the Seattle Seahawks here, 5 picks. I'm I'm going to throw in the 3, and then I believe this is a 6 right here. So they're going to move up 5 spots. They're going to throw in a 3rd-round pick and a 6th-round pick right here with the Seattle Seahawks. And the reason they're going to do this is because they're going to go ahead and get a receiver before a run on wide receiver starts. And that's kind of this zone right over here where we could potentially see like all 4 of these teams make it 5 if the Giants were still sitting here, where like they could all go wide receiver here. And they've committed to Daniel Jones. Oh my God, you scared me. Oh my God. He's just standing back there just staring at me. And I think that, they want to win right now. I mean, you signed Daniel Jones to that massive contract. I think that's a sign. And so, although they do have a lot of young wide receivers on this team, I still think that there's room for improvement. And so, we're going to take a look at this wide receiver board right here. I'm going to go with Jordan Addison here out of USC. Now, this might not be the top wide receiver on my board that's still remaining, but I just think that this is a huge fit. I mean, this is a team that's going to run the ball a lot. They're going to, use Daniel Jones in the run game a lot. And I just think that having this receiver that really excels in run after the catch and just finding space and getting open, I think this would be a huge plus for this offense. I don't know how to explain it much more than that. But I think if they can go out there and get their wide receiver of their choice before this run goes on, then I think this trade makes a lot of sense. Now, I'm still freaked out. I don't know how long my brother was standing back there just staring at me make this video. Yeah, okay, anyway. This run on wide receiver is going to start, as I mentioned before. We're going to go with Zay Flowers here. Look, whether you think, there are other receivers on this board that are, just better physically, such as a Quentin Johnson, or even like Rashee Rice, Jalen Hyatt. Look, his size, Zay Flowers, has never been an issue, and like this would be like the home run pick here for the Los Angeles Chargers because you have a decent route runner, and an aging one in Keenan Allen. You have your 50-50 guy in Mike Williams. They need someone to be a true separator, and I mean, you kind of have that with like Joshua Palmer and Jalen Guyton, but like we need a guy who's a little bit more skillful and just doesn't have only speed. And I think that's exactly what Zay Flowers is. And for a guy who is not the tallest, can really go up there and make a contested catch as well, has really good acceleration, and just runs really, really good routes. So he's a really good wide receiver. Not sure where he's going to go. Could potentially go higher, but this would be a huge win for the Chargers if they can get him here at 21. Here for the Ravens, they also need to go out and get a wide receiver. Quentin Johnson's been falling in this mock draft, and he's going to go here at number 22 here for the Baltimore Ravens. They just need to address the position. I mean, you have Rashad Bateman, who's your 1 right now, and you took him the first round a couple of years ago. But other than that, I mean, there are some notable names, but not because of their wide receiver play. And so it's a guy with a lot of upside here in Quentin Johnson, where it's not every day you get a guy who's that big and can do that much with the ball after he has it in his hands. And so that's, you're really banking on that potential. And I think he just needs to play bigger too. There are so many times where you see him at the line of scrimmage and he gets jammed really easily. And he just is so slow to get off of his routes. And that surprises me considering how big he is. So I don't know. He needs to just play bigger. I mean, he's playing like a smaller receiver with how good he is with his run after the catch. So really needs to put all of his physical traits together and really put good use into each and every one of his abilities. Look, Quentin Johnson, I'm a little nervous about at this point in the draft, but we'll see where he goes. Here for the Vikings now. What we're going to do is we're going to have a trade down in. Perfect. The Buffalo Bills right here. And then I believe this one we also did a first and a third. It could be less. Like we could do we'll do a first and a fourth. Now, you might be thinking like this doesn't make a ton of sense for the Vikings, but the Vikings right now are rocking with I believe only 5 picks out of the 7 rounds. So I think any sort of compensation could be good for them here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I'm doing that here as a Vikings fan. So, I mean, I wouldn't try to sabotage my own team, obviously. But here for the Buffalo Bills, what they're going to go ahead and do is take Bijan Robinson, and they are going to trade up for him. And this is a team right now that's sitting with James Cook and Nyheim Hines at running back. Not feeling confident about either of those guys. And the reason why they would trade up is because there is a potential that I think a team like Dallas could trade up for Bijan Robinson. Maybe someone in the early second round could trade up for Bijan as well. I mean, this is a really, really good running back, and I understand that there's a lot of people in the draft community that are like, okay, don't take running back in the first round because it's just not a position that has a lot of value anymore, and they're easily replaceable. Bijan Robinson is a dude. I mean, this is a guy that in so many other drafts, like, I mean, you could say like 5 years ago, would go in the top 10 for sure, and it wouldn't even be a debate. And the time has just changed now, but I still think that there is value in taking the position, and I mean, there certainly is. I mean, there are so many good teams with rotational backs, and you're not paying him a ton here when you draft him at 23. So I just think it just makes a lot of sense here for Buffalo, who is in a win now, to try and address that run game, and they need to get Bijan Robinson, who is a clear-cut number one running back prospect heading into the draft. Here at 24, we're going to go ahead and take Joey Porter Jr. Now, Joey Porter, I think, is going to go much higher, but just the way that this mock draft has went, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, stuff happens. Certain players that are really talented are going to fall on the board, and it happens every year. And so, for me, it's Joey Porter this year. But this is a team that got rid of Shaquille Griffin. They're at cornerback, and so I do think that they need to get another boundary corner out there. That's what they're going to do with Joey Porter Jr., who I think many would consider to be good value at this point in the draft here at number 24. Here at number 25, Bryan Bresee, the interior defensive lineman, is going to go from Clemson. So they address the edge rusher position with Tyree Wilson. They were the number 5 overall pick, and then address the interior of the defensive line. They also brought in Draymond Jones as well this offseason, coming over from the Denver Broncos. So really, really shoring up this defensive line this offseason. And I think this is a good value. Like, even though Bryan Bresee has really fallen, I mean, he used to be projected in the top 10, even sometimes the top 5 with the Seahawks, and has dropped all the way to here at 25. I mean, I do think that this is more reasonable, and it always happens, We always make predictions on who's going to be the projected top 10, and, guys fall out. But that's not because they're not good. It's just because maybe other players are just really, like they're better. They're better is what I'm saying. And so I think that this is a good value to take Bryan Bresee here for the Seattle Seahawks, and they trade down and they still get the player that they want. So I think this makes a ton of sense. Here for the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to go ahead and take Dalton Kincaid. They really addressed the wide receiver room, just traded for Brandon Cooks for a 5th and a 6th round pick. Something about this Dallas team, I mean, like, it's going to sound weird coming from someone who's not a Dallas Cowboys fan, but it seems a little different because, like, you go out there and you get Stephon Gilmore. You also go out there and you get yourself Brandon Cooks. Like, this team feels more complete than it has in the past. And so I think that this would really solidify things here with Dalton Kincaid. Now, would they be interested in taking Bijan Robinson if they could? Very interesting. I mean, Tony Pollard's a really good running back, but we do know that they like to go with a rotation, and we saw that when Zeke was still in the backfield with them. So that could also be another team that we see potentially trade up for Bijan Robinson here in the first round. But Dalton Kincaid, I mean, they lost Dalton Schultz. This is your Dalton replacement here with Dalton Kincaid, and gives Dak another weapon and less excuses to work with. Here for the Minnesota Vikings, we're going to go with Deonte Banks here at number 27. So they trade down, and they still get a good player who fills a need. And the thing is that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, the new general manager for the Minnesota Vikings, really likes his prospects that excel in the 10-yard split. And Deonte Banks is one of those guys who fits that profile and also fills a need here for this Vikings team. So if they can get him here at 27, even if they sat there at 23, I feel like that would be really good value. And as you mentioned before, if you need a corner, this is a draft to need a corner in, because there are so many guys that I think teams would feel comfortable taking at their spot. I mean, for the Vikings, right, like we look at this spot right here, Forbes, Smith, Stevenson, Ricks, Brents, Ringo, like there's a lot of good names out there. So, yeah, good spot here for any quarterback needy team. Speaking of a cornerback needy team right here, we're going to go, interesting, I have some options here. I'm going to go with Cam Smith here. Uh, out of South Carolina. It's a really good corner that I think is, really being underrated throughout this draft process. I know I'm much higher on him than other people are, but just does a really good job of not panicking when the ball's in the air and finding that football, and really excels in man coverage. And I think also does a really good job in zone coverage as well. Like, I'm pretty much saying that he's good at everything, just, kind of spreading it out a little bit. But I'm not sure. Like, I know it's because he had a down year this past year at South Carolina, but I still think there's a lot of potential, there's a lot of talent, and he's a really confident cornerback. So I like him here at number 28 for the Bengals, who kind of have an aging group there at cornerback position that they need to address. Okay, here, pick number 29 here for the New Orleans Saints. We're going to go ahead and take Myles Murphy here. Now, I know that there is an emphasis to get an interior defensive lineman for this team, but as I mentioned before with teams like the Bears and the Atlanta Falcons, like, I'm looking at this interior defensive lineman group, and I just don't feel comfortable taking any of these guys in the first round. Like, they could potentially trade back into like the early second round. Maybe we take these guys, but just not feeling any of these guys in the first round right here. Myles Murphy could potentially go sooner in this year's draft, but Marcus Davenport is going to free agency. Peyton Turner hasn't really done much yet. You also have Cameron Jordan, who is an aging player who's not going to be there forever. So I think that's a position that we really need to look at. And there are some edge players here that I would feel comfortable taking, and I just feel like it makes more sense here in terms of value for the New Orleans Saints. Here at number 30 for the Philadelphia Eagles, let's go linebacker here. And we're going to go with Drew Sanders. I really like Drew Sanders, man. I mean, this is a football player right here, and they lost TJ Edwards in free agency, and so not really sure who's going to be running that linebacker group. Really high on Nakobe Dean, so I can't wait to see what he does this upcoming season, but I think they need more than just him in the middle, so we're going to go ahead and give him Drew Sanders right here. Very good football player, high motor guy, and is always around the football, whether it's in the backfield or running sideline to sideline. Like, that's what I like about him. He's just always around the football, so I like Drew Sanders. They're at number 30, and to close off the first round, we're going to go with Jalin Hyatt. I don't know what it is like about Jalin Hyatt. Like, I feel like this type of receiver is going to be talked about a lot in a draft. Like, he put up 5 touchdowns against Alabama. That's not a fluke. I don't know what it is. Like, I like Jalin Hyatt much more than this. I have him as my number 2 receiver this year. But I just feel like people are hating on him for no reason. I really don't understand it. And, like, it's one of those guys where it's like, you're hating on him, and then he goes on the Chiefs, and everyone's like, oh my God, I'm so scared because this is a guy who had 5 touchdowns against Alabama. It's like, well, none of you guys were respecting him before he was on the Chiefs. So, I don't know. I just feel like it's one of those picks, and it would make too much sense for Kansas City, and like they would not pass up on a speedy, deep threat receiver like this who possesses so much talent. So, I don't know what it is, but I still think he deserves to go in the first round, so I had to plug him in there somewhere, and I think I did a good job doing this based off of memory, considering that it was not saved earlier. Now, I didn't do the second round. But, if this video does well enough, we'll have a second round mock draft ready for you guys. So, how many likes should we try and look for on this video? Let me take a look at like what my recent like count has looked like so far. Okay. If we can hit 30 likes, we'll do round 2 of this draft, and then if not, then y'all just gotta wait. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this mock draft. I'm just gonna do a quick scan right here just in case you want to see it in review again. You can always pause it if I'm going too quickly right here. But that is my first round NFL mock draft post 1 week of free agency. If you guys enjoy what you see, consider subscribing. We are on the road to 600 subscribers. We're going to be doing so many mock drafts in these next 2 months leading up to the draft. But until then, I'll see you guys all later.